Welcome to the Strive podcast, where we embark on a captivating journey through the realms of mind, medicine, and motivation. I'm Simon, your host, and today I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Elad Levy, one of the most influential figures shaping modern cerebrovascular care, surgical innovation, and academic neurosurgical leadership. Dr. Levy is a distinguished professor and the L. Nelson Hopkins Endowed Chair of Neurosurgery at the University of Buffalo, where he also serves as physician leader of the Neurosurgery service line. Across his career, he has operated at the intersection of high-stakes clinical care, translational research, and health system design, helping redefine how stroke is treated, how neurosurgery is delivered, and how innovation can be sustained within academic medicine. He's internationally recognized as a pioneer of mechanical thrombectomy for acute ischemic stroke, serving as the U.S. International Principal Investigator for the landmark SWIFT Prime trial that helped establish thrombectomy as standard of care. Beyond clinical innovation, Dr. Levy is a builder of systems. He led the creation of Atlas, the nation's first ambulatory neurosurgery center performing cerebral diagnostic and interventional procedures, challenging long-held assumptions about where and how complex neurosurgical care must occur. He has also co-led groundbreaking work in brain-computer interfaces, a funded command trial, bringing minimally invasive neurotechnology from concept to human application. Dr. Levy represents the modern physician leader, someone who understands not only how to operate, but how to design teams, institutions, and care models that endure. In this episode, we explore the paradigm shifts he has helped create, the leadership frameworks behind them, and the reflective insights gained from a career spent pushing the boundaries of what medicine can be. Don't forget to like, follow, and share this episode to keep up with the insightful conversations we bring. For more updates and exclusive content, follow us on Instagram or X at strive_podcast and on TikTok at SimonOfficial. Join our community and be part of the journey to explore mind, medicine, and motivation. Hi, Dr. Levy.
Thank you for having me, Si.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited for what we're going to talk about. A lot of cool things that you do. I hope I did a good job summarizing all the major accomplishments and contributions you've provided to not only just medicine, neurosurgery, but also how we think about providing care for patients.
My mother would have been proud of that introduction, so thank you.
But so why don't we just start off, when you look back at the pre-2015 era, right, the care for ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke was quite different from how we currently interface with it. How did patient outcomes for stroke look, and how revolutionary was the idea of mechanical thrombectomy?
Great question. So literally was there on the ground floor in 2009. So we ushered in what I'd like to say it was the era of rehabilitation into the era of intervention, right? You had a stroke pre-2015, pre-2010. Maybe you give TPA clot busters, but it's really ICU care, supportive care, and then rehabilitation. That was it. So 2001, I'm a fellow in Buffalo with Nick Hopkins, and a patient with a basilar thrombus comes in, and we're twirling wires, we have no devices, and the patient doesn't do well. And he says, if cardiologists can open up acute coronary occlusions, STEMI, we can do the same for brains. And I remember the case, I remember the patient, I remember where I was in 2001. If cardiologists can do this in the heart, we can do this in the brain. And fast forward hundreds of papers, early clinical trials or early registries, single center registries with stents, and we weren't smart enough to make it a detachable or pull the stent down when we're finished. But certainly a huge learning curve, canine basilar stroke models, so the first animal model for stroke, and then, talks. And I'll remember, and I know I say this fondly because you're at Penn, I'm giving a talk around 2005 at a national meeting. I'm a young attending, chest is up, chin is up. I'm so proud to show this acute stroke intervention where we opened up the MCA bifurcation, and a former chair at Penn stands up, and I think he's about to give me a wonderful, all these accolades and just tell me how proud he is. And he says, Dr. Levy, if I had a tomato, I would throw it at your face. You're cowboys and renegades and pariahs, and he went on. And now you have groupthink mentality. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. Came back to Buffalo. I said, Nick Hopkins at the chair, kind of Gen 1 stroke thrombectomy. I said, they hated us. And he says, if you weren't causing a visceral reaction, you're probably not doing anything worthwhile. And that never left me. That inspired me. Fast forward 10 more years, Swift Prime, we changed the world. Paradigm shift. Stroke goes from era of rehab, rehabilitation, to the era of intervention, and that was it.
Very cool story. And, along the way, there's a lot of uncertainties about how this is going to play out, how you're going to get, the scientific community behind it as well, right? And obviously, clinical trials are a great way to, bolster the support with data-driven discovery of what happened. But I'm sure that, it's very frustrating and also, saddening when not everybody can see the vision that you're trying to put forward with such a revolutionary technology. And you kind of hinted at it. How did you kind of deal with those uncertain moments as you went through it?
I mean, you're right. Sometimes it's maddening and saddening. So I was never uncertain because I saw patients coming in, can't move a side of their body, can't speak. You pull the clot out, you open them up, and on the table, they're saying, "Thank you, doc," or they're starting to move, or the next day, and they're not going to nursing homes anymore. They're going home to their families. And then the academic community, our peers said, we want level 1 evidence. We want randomized control clinical trials. So here it is, and I'll never miss the opportunity to thank the patients who are willing to randomize themselves to the medical arm so they don't get thrombectomy, to the medical arm when we knew thrombectomy was the way to go, so patients in perpetuity would never be destined to be deprived of thrombectomy. So the trial, Swift Prime, was slated for 800 patients. The Data Safety Monitoring Board stopped it at just under 200. I think it was 199 patients because there was no equipoise. There was no equivalence. Thrombectomy had such better outcomes, they didn't need to continue the trial, stop the trial, done. Thrombectomy with TPA at the time was superior to TPA alone, and then more trials and the Dawn trial. And again, we created a new paradigm and a new standard of care. But it was relentless. It's pushing the ball, pushing that boulder up the mountain. Sisyphus.
Definitely. And the moment, was there a specific moment that was like an aha moment for the people around you, the broader scientific community, or was it just that slow, gradual climb up that you kind of described that kind of got the success?
So it took a decade. And my former chairman at Pittsburgh, PJ Janetta, would say, in order to create a paradigm shift, you need a generation of neurosurgeons to move on, to retire or pass away. So you need new people to come up and think differently. They can't be recalcitrant. So the first 5 years, it was, you are renegades and cowboys. The next few years were, maybe they're onto something. The next few years were, we do that too. And the final years were, oh yeah, we thought of this. We've been doing this forever. So that's sort of that, when there's that evolution of a new idea and it's being accepted, it goes from, we are going to resist it, to maybe we have interest, to we've accepted it, and the final stage is, we thought of this a long time ago.
Definitely. And when we look at mechanical thrombectomy outcomes today, right, if we look across patient selection, time to treatment, anesthesia, across these different multifaceted spectrums, what do you think is the most misunderstood constraint when it comes to determining those outcomes?
So I think there are two now. If you would have asked me that question a few years ago, I think what's misunderstood is that whole time is brain concept. Time is brain, and every hour, every minute, 2 million neurons per minute die during a stroke. So time does matter, but that doesn't mean that we're all forwards off the same assembly line. We all have different collateral circulation. We all have different heart pumps. We all have different resilience in our brains, different circulations. So you need complex imaging, CT perfusion ideally, MR in certain cases, but 6 hours for one patient means a very different stroke burden than 6 hours for another patient. So that's one misunderstood concept. And then the Dawn trial shows that we can treat these patients 24 hours out for some patients. The other misconception is just because you're in a time window doesn't make you a candidate. Some people have complete infarctions in 3 hours. And now we have these trials looking at large core infarct, and is there a benefit? And that's debatable. And I think just because you're in a time window does not mean you're a candidate for thrombectomy. So one misconception, time is brain, yes and no. The second misconception is just because you're in a time window does not make you a candidate. We can't make dead brain come to life, right? Once it's infarcted, it's infarcted.
Definitely. And just thinking about mechanical thrombectomy as a whole, like it's pretty crazy to think that, it's such a new creation, right? I can't really imagine a world without mechanical thrombectomy now because it's so integrated within neurosurgical care, ischemic stroke care. And I was just wondering, as we have this new implementation of a technology or a procedure, right? And we're at the forefront of how we decide stroke systems nationally, the different, things that determine it, not just like the care you provide for the patient. It kind of relates back to why I did my MBA in learning the systems outside of clinical care that influence how we take care of patients. But if you could look at stroke systems nationally, and if there's one lever that we could redesign, what would you specifically target so that this life-changing therapy can be accessed by more people?
So I would start with the end user group, the patient. So everybody knows what a heart attack is, right? Chest pain, arm pain, jaw pain. I'm having a heart attack. People somehow don't understand what a stroke is yet. I'm having a little bit of garbled speech, or my arms feel, I'm going to sleep it off, or for whatever reason I've lost balance, maybe because the strokes are so heterogeneous. I would focus on patient education of what stroke symptoms are, and it's not get to the nearest hospital. It's actually get to the nearest hospital that is thrombectomy capable if it's within an hour. If it's not, then the nearest hospital that can do some kind of bridging, TPA, aspirin, and fly you to someplace else. So it's the education. Patients often wait, they sleep it off, they go to sort of their local community hospital, which may be a few minutes closer than the major medical center, which may be down the road because they don't understand the difference in technologies and capabilities. So for me, patient education, because patients are going to drive the care, right? Patients are the ultimate drivers of care.
And I wanted to follow up on that, talk a little more about the Atlas Ambulatory Neurovascular Center. I find that quite innovative and very fascinating in its implications for how we can provide neurosurgical care, specialized care through an ambulatory setting. What factors do you think made you realize that neurovascular care could safely move outpatient?
Great question. So it sort of was a culmination of a lot of forces. One, we know every other subspecialty outside of neurosurgery is working in the outpatient sector. Orthopedics moved their hips, their knees, their shoulders 10 years ago. No healthy patient is going into a hospital right now to get their knee replaced or their hips replaced. Cataracts are not being done in a hospital. MRIs used to be in a hospital. Now of course they're not in a hospital anymore. So why are neurosurgeons sort of the last bastion of surgical subspecialty that remain in the hospital? So that's the one question I said. Oh, is there anything that's that special about what we do that can't be done outpatient? I mean, we're doing spine outpatient, but neurovascular, tumor, functional. So let's put a pin in that. And now let's move into sort of the healthcare ecosystem. So when I became chair, we had about 9 attendings. We've grown the program to 21, which means we need more rooms. We need more ORs, more operatories, more block time. So we go to the hospital and say, hey, we also had 2 and then 3, and now we have 5 endovascular attendings. We need more angio suite time. And the answer was, we're not at a place where we can build more space. So I said, can we do a joint venture where we build space together and I can outsource basic diagnostic, basic craniotomy, basic functional, stimulators, pumps into an outpatient center? And the hospital, either they didn't see the vision, they weren't interested in the vision, but they said, we're not interested. So we said, can we do this ourselves? They didn't think we would. And you would have thought I've given a Rodney Dangerfield, to date myself, monologue, laughter, knee slaps. I don't like getting laughed at. But anyway, I said, okay. So 2 years later, we opened our door. We're doing 3,000 cases a year at the nation's only ambulatory neurosurgery center. One other story for you. 6 months into doing endovascular aneurysms there, I'm presenting the data. This is going to be similar to the Penn story in 2004. I'm presenting in Paris at one of their meetings in front of 3,000 people. And I'm aware that this is going to be listened to by a mixed audience, so I'm going to editorialize the actual comment. So I present the first series of outpatient cerebral aneurysms, thinking again this was going to be well received, accolades, and a very senior European endovascular surgeon stands up and says, in his French accent, Dr. Levy, if you're the last doctor, I would never send you my patients. It bothers me in my brain, my belly, and something lower than belly that also starts with a B, which I won't say. I'm like, okay, we'll use the term courage, a synonym for courage that starts with a B. Anyway, so I said, well, here are the outcomes. All of you said the same thing about thrombectomy 15 years ago. Everyone sitting here, 3,000 people sitting here said the same thing about thrombectomy. Now you all do thrombectomy. You will all be doing outpatient endovascular. And I said, when it comes to courage, I have more courage than all 3,000 of you sitting here. Literally dropped the mic and left the main stage. So we'll see.
Well, it's very cool just to think about from like a value-based perspective, the value we're creating for society, right? If this can be done outpatient, you have a lot of controls over how the OR throughput occurs and the flow rate within that system, and it's managed by physicians. I have a lot of opinions maybe for like another time about like hospital consolidation or like vertical integration of different practices in medicine and the implications of that for the future or how we practice medicine, right? But if you can just control that specific workflow, it seems very intuitive that the surgeons that are the most intimate with this process, the ones that are actually doing it on a daily basis, would also have the best ideas for innovation and making it more efficient, right?
Absolutely. We're the people in the trenches. Why is somebody, and you have an MBA, and I think that's wonderful. I got one later in my career before becoming a chair. Just helps you think differently, but without kind of working in the mailroom, meaning being an intern, a medical student, a junior resident, you don't understand the sort of patient flow. Like literally becoming a medical student and going up through residency, you've worked from the mailroom to the C-suite by the time you're an attending. That's the analogy. So quintuple aim for the other MBAs that might be listening to. So we're dealing with a healthcare issue, patient satisfaction, 5 out of 5 on every patient surveyed, right? Physician satisfaction, healthcare accessibility. We're bending the cost curve. So we can do this at a significant fraction of the cost than the hospital can. And here's one example why. How many people do you think it takes to move a patient from check-in into the operating room or the angio suite? Do you want to take a guess? How many healthcare employees?
I mean, I'd assume it's what's required is one, but it's probably much higher than that.
It's about 15 to 20, depending on the system. So you have check-in people, the patient will walk themselves. Then you have nursing intake. Then transport team will transport them. So now you have a transport team to the holding area, so more intake. Now they will bring them to the operating room, so the operating room team and anesthesia. And then you have the custodial engineers or the custodial team that has to clean the OR, and then transport team. So all in all, 15 to 20. We have 4 people do that also. The same nurse will greet the patient when they check in. They will take them back. They will do the intake. They will do the surgery. They'll stay with that patient. Then they'll divide and conquer, and the healthcare team will actually clean the room until the end of the day when then you have the deep clean by the custodial team. Also, turnaround time. One of the most expensive places in the hospital is the operating room. That's your penthouse Park Avenue apartment, the operating room, dollars per minute. Our turnaround times published, peer-reviewed literature, 10 to 15 minutes. So you've done your rotations or you've been at a major medical center, 10 to 15 minute operating turnover time. Another sort of different way to think about it. A typical hospital pay schedule is people are paid by shifts. So they have to be there for their 8-hour, 10-hour shifts. The more work you do in 10 hours, the more work you do in 10 hours. So human nature would be, I have to be here 8 hours, whether I sweep one floor or 20 floors. So I'm going to sweep one floor. We say, today you need to sweep 8 floors. I'm going to pay you your whole 10-hour shift, whether you finish in 40 minutes or it takes you 10 hours. What do you think the incentive now is? Efficiency. Because, wow, if I'm finished in an hour, I get 9 hours of paid time to be home with my family or go shopping or go to the gym, whatever we need to do. So we've flipped the pay model, we've flipped the care model, we've bent the cost curve. So right now, we right now have that's how we do 3,000 patients a year. We have a surplus of patients. The one thing I will say though is treat every patient the way you would treat your mother, meaning if this is a high risk patient, if it's not healthy anatomy, if there's some complexities, that's what we need the hospital for. So there are many aneurysms, certainly in carotids and all AVMs right now and other neurovascular diseases, complex tumors, complex spine, that we will continue and should be currently done in the hospital because of the support the patient will need. Healthy patients, outpatient.
Definitely. And I think you bring up a very interesting point about a misalignment of incentives. And that can manifest in like maybe somewhat benign ways of like the turnaround time being delayed or longer. But then I think on a whole too, if you look at the system itself, there's a very big perverse misalignment of incentives, whether it's between provider insurance companies, providers, what we define providers too, right? Because in my healthcare management studies, a lot of the times they group physicians and hospitals together as like the provider, and a lot of the times, especially in the health economics like discourse, their solution for cutting down spending or whatever for healthcare is cutting physician salaries, right? Because we're the ones that take up most of the spending. And then they did these studies, realized it only changes like the GDP by like 1% if you actually standardize it to like Norway or something.
You know what the largest increase of costs in healthcare were over the last decade?
What is it?
Managers.
Oh, administrative. Right,
Hospital administration. The amount of dollars paid towards administrators has been exponential compared to what's been flat for physicians. Exponential. So to your point about misalignment and providers, we're bending the cost curve, right? We can show we can provide the care, better quality care, at less cost with greater efficiency. There's your triple win. And the other piece is, so working at a academic institution, like Buffalo, for example, it takes 8 to 12 months to get clinical trials up and running, right? You have to go through your IRB, then you have to go through contracting. 4 weeks at the ASC. Because this is now, as the only ANSC, ambulatory neurosurgery center, we have become a global magnet for clinical trials. So our startup fees are fractions of what the startup fee would be at a major medical center. We're up and running in 4 weeks versus 12 months. By the time a major medical center is up and running in 12 months, we've already enrolled for almost a year of patients. So we expedite basically technology to market. We've certainly controlled the cost. We work with the FDA, and the FDA is trying to decentralize. So not only is this a beautiful clinical play, it is a tremendous clinical trial. I'm hoping these ANSCs become clinical trial epicenters. Again, cost, efficiency, patient care.
Do you know about the Toyota production system?
A little bit, but specifically, which part are you referring to?
So in my quality and productivity class, we learned about how Toyota's like like the Lean Six Sigma like concepts come out of like the principles that they have adopted within like the Toyota production line, and they make like the least mistakes, and like if you look at Toyota's longevity or reliability, one of the best in class for vehicles, right? And so an American company, I think it was GM or Ford, tried replicating that system for themselves in one of the worst performing, I think, cities or factories for them in California. One was successful, because they actually took their employees out to Japan, trained them in Japan, and then brought that, insight back and applied it. And then the people in California where they were successful tried teaching it to another failed system in California, and they failed, right? And I guess this is all just to, go back to the thing of, if you consider yourself or see yourself as like Toyota production system, right? You found a way to become the most efficient in providing neurologic stroke care. If another institution wanted to replicate Atlas, right? What's the minimum viable set, you would say? What are the principles or values that they should adopt? And is it something that can be taught, or they have to be boots on the ground within an Atlas neurovascular center to be able to do it?
Great question and great examples. So yeah, basically we've hosted 20 teams out here, and they basically come in, we'll have dinner, and then they watch it, to your point. Take notes, they'll video in areas that are safe for video. They'll see the throughput, they'll walk through, they'll digest. So it's not even about the architecture. It's what we learned over the 2 years when we opened the door, beginning with spine, then functional, then vascular. And now, as of 3-4 weeks ago, it's the first privately held outpatient gamma knife unit in the United States. So now we're doing radiosurgery out there with the newest version of the Electa gamma knife. So is it reproducible? 100%. Would I recommend some people starting out this way? Probably not. I think this requires at least a leadership team of physicians that have significant amount of experience in their individual space, so they're very comfortable identifying proper patient selection, and they're very technically experienced. Certainly it's okay to have junior partners or young partners come through, but there has to be a lot of seasoning in order for this to remain efficient and, most importantly, safe.
I'm really excited to see how it plays out, though. I think it opens up a whole different world of possibilities for how we can take care of patients. And as I go through residency and after, I'm really excited to see how I can contribute to it as well in the future.
I think you're asking the right questions, and certainly the technologies that are coming out in neurosurgery now are miniature, and they're supple, and they're not meant to be major implants in a hospital. So the technology that we're seeing are ideally suited for outpatient. They're outpatient implantables, whether it's neurorestoration. For example, one of the trials we're doing, Vivistin, right? I think we just published the paper for basically an implant after stroke for stroke. It helps with stroke rehabilitation. The Vivistin implant, just one of the many trials or one of the many devices that we're trialing out at the outpatient center. We don't need to put patients in the hospital for this, right? It's an outpatient procedure. So, as we talked about, clinical trials, bending the cost curve, patient satisfaction, physician satisfaction, right? This, without question, it is the now in Buffalo, but it is the very near future in the United States.
And I also wanted to talk about, from your view as like the chair, like what the chair's dashboard looks like. If you had to think about your balance between clinical production, but also protected innovation time, right? I find the ecosystem at Buffalo quite innovative, with the Jacobs Institute having integrated communication lines between the engineers, device innovation, clinicians, and all of that all in one house. How do you think about that balance, and what trade-offs are real versus, would you say, like cultural mythology?
Despite the recent Bills performance, we're going to use a football analogy, right? So, if you're going to build a highly productive team, it's not all Josh Allen quarterbacks, right? You need your offensive line, you need your quarterback, you need, punters, punt returners, you need sort of the gamut of skill sets. And to pivot very briefly, I tell the residents, and something that was told to me, sweet spot, not sweat spot. So, if you are a technical wizard, I am not going to demand that you spend time writing NIH grants or creating innovation, because that's not your sweet spot. So the first thing I hope by the time people are applying to be an attending or coming through residency is they've identified what they identify what they gravitate to, they identify a sweet spot, and I would say triple down on that. Be the best version of that, but also certainly work your weaknesses. It's important to learn how to write a paper and a grant. You may not do that, but it's important to understand that. So the dashboard. It starts with good people. I can't teach good people. I can't make you a good human, and you can't build a good culture if you have partners that are not good humans, right? And so it starts with that rule. It starts with you have to surround yourself with good people. The second is once we've identified and we've agreed that this is your sweet spot, I want to try to really immerse you in that. So if you love operating and you're technically, and you want to build those technical skills, let's get you that block time. If you want to be a scientist clinician and really see a career with NIH funding, I will protect you. I will give you that protected time and create support over the first few years to see if we can get you that type of funding. And the last part is sort of benevolence and generosity around patient care and education, right? So you're becoming a neurosurgeon. Why? In the end, to affect patient care, to enhance patient care. So you do these three things. For me, you're going to be successful. I only care about RVUs if you say to me, I'm an RVU guy. If you're not an RVU man or woman, then I don't care about the RVUs. If you tell me you're a writer, I want to see productivity. Whatever you tell me you are, I want to see you sort of honing those skills, growing, and achieving excellence in that arena.
So almost like picking a certain specialization and creating an ecosystem that's conducive to developing that specific specialization for productivity.
And then there's some people that are quadruple or triple threats, and like in that Venn diagram. So Buffalo has a very interesting ecosystem. So when I'm operating or one of my partners are operating, most of the time we have 50 clinical trials running. Can we enroll the patient in a clinical trial that makes sense? So now we're operating. We're enrolling in a clinical trial, so collecting data. Maybe we're using a widget or a device that we beta tested or collaborated with up in the Jacobs Innovation Center that we somehow had a part of in the innovation process. So that all is in the ether, right, through collisions. We're working with engineers to say, you know what, this technology is good, but here's where it fails. Can we do X, Y, and Z, maybe test it in vitro or models or in vivo models, bring it back, and now we're in a clinical trial. So there are many examples where clinical trial, technical excellence, and then grants overlap.
Definitely. And I find culture also an interesting thing, right? Because it seems quite reasonable to do it on like a smaller level, but as you keep scaling, it becomes a bit more difficult, right? And you more than doubled faculty while maintaining all of those productivity metrics that you talked about, while also maintaining that culture. What would you say your hiring philosophy or just general view towards preserving that culture was?
So I think a lot of it comes from being a former rower. I was at Dartmouth. Actually, my pair partner at U.S. Juniors was a Penn rower, PJ Smith. But I think a lot of that comes from team before self, and trying, if I am going to leading from the trenches, right? Leading from example. I always tell the people, I will hold you to a high standard. We will grow, and growth means sometimes growing pains, right? It's not comfortable to grow. But I will never ask people to do things I wouldn't ask of myself. I'm hoping to set the example. I will push hard, but we all are pulling together. So former Olympian and my coach at Dartmouth, Larry Gluckman, would say, pull harder. And that was the best advice, because if you're winning a race, pull harder so you don't fall behind. If you're losing a race, pull harder because you have to make up ground. There is no time in life where pulling harder is not good advice, right? So strategically, you're growing a department, we're all pulling harder, we're all pulling together. But it starts with, as we talked about a few minutes ago, it starts with good people, make good culture. And culture is very important. And I think UB Neurosurgery has a tremendous culture where it's team before self. And we sort of recite our mission statements, and we talk about team before self almost before every quarterly board meeting.
Definitely. And just looking at your perspective on like, research portfolios or which programs to focus on versus not, especially with the current funding climate, not knowing if NIH dollars are going to go up or stay the same or go down. What have you seen to be resilient with the test of time? Is it like the device trials, still relying on the NIH, philanthropy industry? Where do you see the most value?
Honestly, bet on yourself, right? Bet on yourself. Don't be reliant on any entity, any other funding. Um, Golden rule, right? There is a golden rule: do unto others, which is the best rule, and then the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have done unto themselves, not as you would have unto you, right? Treat others the way they want to be treated. And then the other golden rule, again from my former chair, is he who makes the gold makes the rules. Uh, so when I say be self-reliant, as government funding continues to dwindle or continues to be less available, there's industry, but eventually industry funding is going to dry up, or potentially funding from reimbursement, from payer reimbursement. So I think being that triple threat, right? We have government grants, we have foundation grants, we're doing clinical trials. Certainly, we work with the insurers to create, fair economy around delivery. But again, it's sort of a balanced portfolio, so to speak, right? Not all your eggs in one basket. And when we don't have government funding, but we have researchers or clinicians that want to have a trial, we self-start it, we self-fund it. And that's been a great strategy too. We self-funded the ambulatory neurosurgery center. We didn't take any outside dollars, and it's been tremendous. Subsequently, we are going to sell a 60% equity piece as we hope to scale this. But the point is, the summary nugget there is bet on yourself.
I also wanted to talk about you getting the MBA in your career and whether it changed how you approached clinical leadership. What would you say the MBA changed in your day-to-day decision making, if it did?
I think that's a great question. It really removed the myopia, right? It removed that blinders. As you come through medicine, med school, pre-med track, we continue to become more target focused and more laser focused on whatever medical track we're going to do, but we don't understand the interconnection, the interplay with the entire healthcare systems, whether it's vertical, horizontal integration. We don't understand the vernacular. So by at least understanding that language, understanding things like contribution margin, right? So it's amazing how many of my partners don't understand the term contribution margin. If I can take 2 minutes for your listeners, why that's so important as a physician. Your contribution margin is the amount of money you're bringing into the hospital minus the cost of what it costs for you to provide that care. So if I'm very lean and I use a minimum widgets and I'm very efficient, the contribution margin is high. If I take a long time and I'm disposing and I'm using every tool under the sun and opening things and throwing them away, eventually my contribution margin could be negative. And if my practice is out of the ER, it's very replaceable. But if I have a large proportion of my practice is elective, I choose to bring it to that hospital, and I'm very efficient and lean, and my contribution margin is high, that now gives me a seat at the table. So when I need to have something brought in for the department or for strategic growth, people are listening. But if it's costing them more money than I'm bringing, forgetting about downstream revenue, my voice may not be as clear as it could be. They may not listen as much. But these are terms you learn, right? And that's what the MBA helped me understand: how to be strategic, how to create strategy, how to integrate in the healthcare system.
Definitely. And when I was considering getting the MBA, and I was talking to Dr. Srinivasan, who's my mentor at Penn, and Dr. Griffith Srinivasan, and he basically told me I'm at a certain advantage.
Give him my regards, by the way.
Definitely, I will. He told me that I'm at a specific advantage because I'm undifferentiated. I don't think about things a certain way. And so being able to approach this information from an undifferentiated mindset and then taking it into residency has its merits. So that was quite useful advice that I'm definitely reaping the benefits for now.
Absolutely. I think the time you're getting that MBA either right before or early on in residency, much better approach than 10 years out, and where I sort of almost did it as a means to an end. it broadened my sort of vantage point once I started, but I was really very differentiated at that point, right?
Yeah.
So much better approach.
And if you had to, when you see your physician colleagues right after you gain your business education or formal business education, because as a chair, you have to learn these things on the go, right? On the job training that, they wouldn't necessarily get with formalized training otherwise. What do you think is a common business mistakes that you think physicians make when they try to innovate or try to apply certain things within the health system that they might not be aware of?
Sometimes I feel that they don't understand either the ripple, the domino effect, the impact it may have, right? So physicians want to implement whatever change. What is the impact in the healthcare system? How many patients does it truly affect? Does it move the needle, right? So my brother Guy runs a medtech hedge fund, and he always says, like, an idea can be great, but if it only affects a very small percentage, it's now not interesting, right? So much better to have a small iterative change or a small innovation that can affect a large population of the patients being served by that hospital. It's going to give you a much greater impact. And I think that's the mistake. Sometimes especially neurosurgeons, right? We'll look at something that's very expensive, which affects such a minority of patients that it really does not move the needle, and it becomes very uninteresting for a healthcare system.
Right. Definitely. It's like the thing about like hospital or like surgical gloves or like hospital beds. Like they're considered devices, I believe. And if you think about like the impact that has had on like just value adds to society, it's very different from like the specific things, I guess, even within like a very specialized form of medicine like neurosurgery can provide. So I think thinking about that from like a broader perspective and the total addressable market makes a lot of sense.
Or even a length of stay, right? If you can decrease length of stay by half a day on your entire service every day, the amount of millions of dollars that would be saved by a system, the realized savings is huge. And sometimes that just means a simple process fix like writing the discharge the night before. You don't have to execute it the next day, but let's say, and we lived through this, you're going to write it the next day, but now you get called to the operating room or you're dealing with an emergency and it gets pushed, and now you miss the window and the patient stays overnight again, or they're getting discharged very late in the day. All you have to do is those 10 minutes, just front load it the night before and either execute it or don't. So it's these, and I think, especially surgeons, we don't think that way, right? We think, I need a better microscope, or if you bought me this implant, it's going to change the world for me. I think this is why MBAs, or at least thinking from a system standpoint, is so important for surgeons if they want to have leadership roles, if they want to affect a change.
And I also wanted to talk about command and BCIs and looking at the path from feasibility to a real product that patients can access. For a lay audience, what would you say is the single most important difference between, say, an endovascular BCI and a craniotomy-based BCI? And why does that matter for scaling?
Yeah, great question. So I think probably the easiest scale device is probably going to be the Neuralink, because the robot can put it in, and really that can be done anywhere and even in an outpatient center. The endovascular BCI from the command trial, the one we use, is the least invasive. We just basically put it up through the jugular. Also can be done outpatient, but you need endovascular specialty training, which does create some limitation. What do these do? They basically now outsource your body's movement. So for patients who are paralyzed for whatever reason, Lou Gehrig's disease, spinal cord injury, stroke, by thinking, you can basically outsource, and training the computer can move a wheelchair, turn on a light, turn on a faucet, anything motorized, you can basically program by thinking. So the beautiful part is you're reconnecting a patient to the world and giving them back some autonomy, right? Instead of having to have a 24-hour aid, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need X, Y, and Z? I can now initiate communication through Apple Vision or an iPad or any other peripheral. That's the wonderful part about BCI. There are many out there right now. And if we're going to reduce the time horizon for scaling and efficacy, they need to talk, right? They need to share technologies. Otherwise, what I say is we're in the Wright brothers era of BCI, of brain-computer interface. We're not ready yet for public transport, for public flying. We're in the Wright brothers. And there are many different Wright brother companies, but hopefully over time, the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to start moving into an aviation era where it's getting ready for prime time.
Would you say that's the adoption bottleneck right now? Is just like siloed information that kind of stifles progress?
Very siloed information, very expensive technologies, very sort of limited right now. And philosophically, this is also, and not putting words in Elon Musk's mouth, this is going off of one of his lectures that he gave at CNS. And, when I spoke at the same meeting about command, it's about restoring humanity, neurorestoration, making injured brains healthy again. There are others that want to sort of say, we want to have processors that are faster than iPhones. We want to basically, improve our brain's computing power. So you have two very divergent philosophies about the use of BCI. So eventually we need ethics around this. We need we need guardrails around how these are going to be used, because eventually with these divergent philosophies, the question becomes, what is industry going to do with BCIs? Are we going to be making supercomputer brains, or are we going to do neuro restoration? Two very different futures, but very real possibilities.
Definitely. And I've heard many times that, people say like functional neurosurgery is the future of neurosurgery and stuff like that. But I don't know, didn't make intuitive sense for me. But then as I think about it, I feel like most, or if not all, subspecialties of neurosurgery have some component of function sparing within that, right? And so the way I see it is just every different subspecialty seems to be going towards preserving function as best as possible with like the methods they have within their specialty.
Yeah, I think that's very astute, actually, comment. So what I tell medical students when they're or young residents interested in different parts of neurosurgery, I think it's going to be functional plus. So vascular with functional, spine with functional, tumor with functional, because we are going to be in a future where neuroimplantables, neurocomputer interfaces are going to be our reality. How we're putting them, where we're putting them, who's getting them, is going to be based, it's going to be based on some of our subspecialty training. So functional is going to be part of our reality. Just, are you vascular functional or are you spinal functional?
Yeah, and as we come to near the end of the episode, I wanted to reflect and get some insights from you. When people when people summarize your career, they'll mention the innovation at Buffalo, they'll mention thrombectomy, Atlas, Jacobs, Command, many awards. But when you look inward, what do you hope actually mattered most?
I hope what matters most is people think I moved the needle because I cared about improving healthcare, leaving our ecosystem of neurosurgery better than I found it, right? I wanted to move us forward. That's what I hope people remember.
Definitely. And you're very inspirational to people like me just starting off. A lot to learn from you, Dr. Levy.
Well, I look forward to meeting you in person as you continue your medical journey.
Definitely. And thank you so much for coming on the Strive podcast. I really appreciate you giving me the time. I know you're busy. I know you have surgeries to do, but I appreciate you finding the time to do this with me today.
A lot of fun. I look forward to it.